9:00 a.m., October 9th, 2020. A gray Nissan tears down U.S. Highway 82, eating up the asphalt between Texas and Oklahoma. Inside, the driver's hands are slick with blood. It's fresh. It's warm. It's not hers. In her lap, wrapped in a blanket that's more red than white, is a tiny, gasping infant. The baby's chest shudders, fighting for air it was never meant to breathe like this, outside a womb, outside a hospital, outside any kind of mercy. Every bump in the road is another jolt of pain. 30 miles behind her, in a small house in New Boston, Texas, the source of that blood is cooling on the floor. A 21-year-old mother lies face down in her own home, her skull shattered, her body turned into something unrecognizable. More than 100 stab wounds tear through her face, her neck, her chest, her back. Her abdomen has been sliced open, not by a surgeon in a sterile room, but by a woman with a scalpel and a plan. Her womb is empty. Her baby is gone. In the back bedroom, a 3-year-old little girl has woken up to the sound of violence, to the silence that follows it, to a house that suddenly feels wrong. She is just a few steps away from her mother's body and has no idea that when she walks into that room, her entire life will split into before and after. The woman in the car, her name is Taylor Renee Parker. She's never been pregnant. She cannot have children. Doctors removed her uterus years ago, but for 10 months, she has worn a fake bump, flashed fake ultrasounds, thrown a gender reveal party, smiled for photos, and told everyone who would listen that she was expecting a baby. She let her boyfriend fall in love with a child that did not exist. She let her family buy gifts for a grandchild that would never be born. And on this morning, with blood drying under her fingernails and a stolen baby dying in her arms, Taylor Parker decided that if her body couldn't create life, she'd just take it from someone else. This isn't a tragic misunderstanding. This isn't a crime of passion. This is what it looks like when a lie grows teeth and starts killing. It's a Friday morning in New Boston, Texas, the kind of town where people still leave their doors unlocked and know the names of their neighbors' kids. In a small house on a quiet street, 21-year-old Reagan Simmons Hancock is doing what millions of young moms do every day, trying to get out the door on time. She's 7.5 months pregnant, her belly heavy, her back aching, but she's excited. Today is just a routine doctor's appointment, another chance to hear her baby girl's heartbeat. In the back room, her 3-year-old daughter Kinley is still asleep, tangled in blankets, clutching the stuffed animal she won't go anywhere without. The TV in the living room is off. There's a coffee cup on the counter. It is the picture of normal. Reagan moves slowly, but with that specific kind of joy only a pregnant mother understands. She has a name picked out: Braxlyn Sage. There are tiny clothes folded in drawers, a diaper bag half-packed, a car seat waiting to be installed. She's not rich, not famous, not perfect. She's just a young mom in a small Texas town, building a life for her 2 little girls and trusting that tomorrow will come. She doesn't know that as she brushes her hair, as she glances at the clock, as she thinks about getting Kinley ready and heading to that appointment. Someone else is already on the road. Someone who has studied her, watched her, and chosen her. Someone driving toward this house with a hammer, a scalpel, and a lie so big it is about to swallow Reagan's entire world. In just a few minutes, Reagan's mother will pull into this same driveway, walk through this same unlocked door, and step into a scene so violent, so unnatural, that even seasoned detectives will struggle to describe it. What should have been a normal Friday morning in a quiet Texas town is about to become the kind of nightmare that makes national headlines and leaves a family permanently stuck on October 9th, 2020. This is the story of how a small-town photographer with no criminal record, no history of violence, and no prior arrests became one of the most hated women in the state of Texas. How a fake pregnancy, 10 months of carefully staged lies, fake ultrasounds, and padding under clothes turned into one of the most brutal murders the state has ever seen. How a jury took less than an hour to convict her, and how just weeks later they sentenced a 29-year-old woman to die by lethal injection without hesitation, without mercy, and without a single juror asking for leniency. Because here's the thing about Taylor Renee Parker. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like someone you'd see at Target. Someone who'd smile at you in line at the grocery store. Someone who'd post baby bump photos on Facebook and get 100 likes. She had friends, a boyfriend, a life that from the outside seemed messy but manageable. But underneath all of that, there was something cold, something calculating, something so desperate and so dangerous that when it finally surfaced, it didn't just ruin lives, it ended them. This is the story of what happens when a lie becomes more important than a life, when desperation turns into obsession, and when a woman decides that if she can't create the family she wants, she'll just steal someone else's, even if it means carving a baby out of another woman's body while she's still breathing. Buckle up, because what comes next is darker than you think. Let's rewind. Let's go back to before the blood, before the baby, before the nightmare. Let's talk about Taylor Renee Parker and how someone with no history of violence became capable of something this evil. Sims, Texas. Population 583. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where Friday night football is the biggest event of the week, and where people still wave at strangers. Taylor Parker was born here on March 12, 1993. And if you're expecting some tragic backstory, abusive parents, childhood trauma, poverty, you won't find it. Taylor didn't grow up in hell. She grew up normal, maybe even boring. But somewhere along the way, Taylor learned something dangerous. Lying was easier than facing reality. By her early 20s, she'd already been married and divorced. She'd had 2 children and lost custody of both. That should have been a wake-up call. Instead, Taylor doubled down. She started building a fake life online. She posed as a successful real estate agent, posting photos of houses she didn't own, bragging about deals she never closed. Her Facebook became a carefully curated highlight reel of a life that simply did not exist. Friends would comment, congratulate her, tell her how proud they were, and Taylor would smile and keep lying. Then came Wade Griffin. Wade was a mechanic from Texarkana, a good guy, hard-working, the kind of man who wanted a family and a future. For Taylor, Wade was more than a boyfriend. He was a second chance, a fresh start, a way to prove she wasn't a failure. But there was one problem she couldn't Photoshop her way out of. Years earlier, Taylor had undergone a full hysterectomy. Her uterus was gone. Pregnancy wasn't just unlikely, it was medically impossible. Doctors had made that clear. There would be no babies, not now, not ever. So Taylor had a choice. Tell Wade the truth and risk losing him. Or do what she'd always done, lie her way through it and deal with the consequences later. Guess which one she picked? I'm pregnant. Taylor told Wade those 2 words in late 2019, her eyes wide, her voice trembling, with fake emotion. And Wade, he believed her. Why wouldn't he? She was his girlfriend. She had no reason to lie. So he hugged her, probably cried a little, started talking about baby names and nurseries and all the normal things excited fathers-to-be talk about. And Taylor smiled, because the lie had worked. But here's the thing about lies. They don't just disappear. They grow. They demand feeding. And Taylor fed hers every single day for 10 months straight. She printed ultrasound images off Google and photoshopped her name onto them. She bought padding and wore it under her clothes, gradually increasing the size each month to mimic a growing belly. She studied how pregnant women walked, how they complained about back pain, how they cradled their stomachs in photos. She became a method actor, playing the role of a lifetime. By spring 2020, Taylor threw herself a full-blown gender reveal party in Sims. Friends and family gathered. Pink smoke filled the air. Everyone cheered. Wade beamed with pride, probably posted about it online, probably called his mom to tell her the good news. Taylor stood in the center of it all, one hand resting on her fake belly, the other holding a champagne glass she couldn't even drink from because she had to stay in character. She looked happy. She looked glowing. She looked like every other expectant mother in America. But inside, she knew the truth. There was no baby. There never would be. And October, her supposed due date, was getting closer. By late summer 2020, the clock was ticking. Wade was asking questions. When's your next appointment? Have you packed the hospital bag? Are we ready? Taylor kept stalling, kept making excuses, but she knew the end game was coming. And when October arrived, Wade would expect to see a baby, a real breathing, crying baby. So Taylor did what any desperate person would do. She started researching, but not baby names or nursery colors. No, Taylor's Google search history told a much darker story. How to perform a C-section at home. Buying fake ultrasound pictures. Induction procedures step by step. How long can a baby survive outside the womb? She wasn't spiraling into madness. She wasn't having a breakdown. This wasn't some impulsive snap. Taylor Renee Parker was methodically, carefully, coldly planning a murder. She was studying how to cut a baby out of another woman's body and how to make it look like she'd given birth herself. And somewhere in those searches, in those long, quiet hours of planning, Taylor made a decision. If her body couldn't give her a baby, she'd just take one. All she needed was the right victim. Someone pregnant, someone vulnerable, someone who trusted her, someone like Reagan. Reagan Simmons Hancock didn't know she was being hunted. At 21 years old, she was living the life Taylor Parker had only pretended to have. She was genuinely pregnant, 7.5 months, along with her second baby, a little girl she'd already named Braxlyn Sage. She had a 3-year-old daughter, Kinley, who was her whole world. She posted bump updates on Facebook, complained about swollen feet, talked about nursery colors and baby names. She was excited. She was glowing. She was real. And that's exactly why Taylor chose her. Taylor had met Reagan once before, back in 2019, when she was working as a photographer. It wasn't a deep friendship, just a brief encounter, maybe a photo shoot, maybe a mutual friends party. Nothing memorable, the kind of connection that fades after a few weeks. But Taylor didn't forget. She filed Reagan away in the back of her mind. Just another face, just another name. Until February 2020, when Reagan posted her pregnancy announcement on Facebook. That's when Taylor started watching. She liked Reagan's bump photos, commented with heart emojis and encouraging words. "You look amazing. Can't wait to meet her." She positioned herself as a supportive friend, the kind of person who checks in, who cares, who celebrates your milestones. Reagan had no reason to be suspicious. Taylor seemed harmless, sweet even. Just another woman in her circle who was happy for her. But Taylor wasn't happy for Reagan. Taylor was studying her, watching her due date get closer, watching her belly grow, watching her build the life Taylor had lied about having. And somewhere in those quiet, scrolling moments, Taylor made a decision that would end 2 lives and destroy a family forever. Reagan Simmons Hancock had been chosen. She just didn't know it yet. While Taylor was playing the supportive friend online, she was doing something much darker behind the scenes. She started calling pregnancy clinics in Texarkana and Idabel, pretending to be a patient. She asked detailed, specific questions. What happens during labor? How do they monitor the baby? What does a C-section look like? How long does delivery take? The nurses on the other end probably thought she was just a nervous first-time mom. They had no idea they were talking to a woman planning a murder. When one clinic scheduled her for an appointment she couldn't actually attend, because remember, she wasn't pregnant, Taylor didn't just cancel. She called in a bomb threat. She shut down an entire medical facility just to avoid being exposed. Let that sink in. She was willing to terrorize innocent people, to waste police resources, to cause mass panic, all to protect a lie. By late September, Taylor had assembled her toolkit. She bought a fake hospital badge and medical scrubs so she could look official. She purchased a scalpel, not a kitchen knife, not scissors, but a surgical scalpel, the kind used to cut through human tissue with precision. She bought a hammer. She packed a diaper bag with baby supplies as if she were really preparing for a newborn. And Wade, he was still asking questions. When's the baby coming? Are you feeling contractions? Should we go to the hospital? Taylor told him labor was close. She told him she was having Braxton Hicks. She told him everything was fine. And Wade believed her, because why wouldn't he? He had no idea his girlfriend was spending her nights Googling how to cut a baby out of another woman's body. October 9th, 2020, the day the lie became murder. Reagan woke up that morning feeling tired. 7.5 months pregnant will do that to you, but excited. She had a doctor's appointment later, another chance to hear Braxlin's heartbeat, to see her moving on the ultrasound screen. She texted a friend, "Feeling a little off today, but I'm good, just ready to meet her." Kinley was still asleep in the back room. The house was quiet. It was supposed to be a normal Friday. Meanwhile, 30 miles away in Sims, Taylor Parker was loading up her car. She left her home around 6:01 a.m. in her bag, a scalpel, a hammer, a fake hospital badge, a diaper bag stuffed with baby clothes and blankets. She told Wade she was having labor pains and heading to St. Michael's Hospital in Texarkana. He probably kissed her goodbye, told her to be safe, told her he'd meet her there. He had no idea she was lying. Again. Because Taylor wasn't driving to Texarkana. She was driving northeast toward New Boston, toward Reagan's house, toward the woman she had chosen. CBS 4 Local. Taylor had been to Reagan's home before, maybe to drop something off, maybe for a casual visit. Reagan trusted her. So when Taylor knocked on the door that morning, Reagan let her in without hesitation. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no shattered windows. Reagan opened the door and smiled, probably offered her a seat, maybe even made small talk. And for a few minutes, everything seemed fine. 2 women in a living room, one pregnant, one pretending to be. Maybe they talked about babies. Maybe Taylor complimented Reagan's nursery. Maybe Reagan showed her an ultrasound photo. But by 8:30 a.m., the talking stopped. What happened next wasn't a fight that got out of hand. It wasn't an argument that escalated. It was a planned, brutal, methodical attack. Taylor didn't snap. She executed. She pulled out the hammer and swung it at Reagan's head. Once, twice, over and over, until her skull cracked and blood pooled on the floor. Reagan fought back. She had to. She had a 3-year-old in the next room. She had a baby in her belly. She had everything to fight for. But she was 21 years old, barefoot, 7 months pregnant, and overpowered by a woman who had come prepared to kill. And when Reagan finally stopped moving, when her body went still and the screaming stopped, Taylor picked up the scalpel and got to work. What happened inside Reagan's home wasn't quick. It wasn't clean. It was absolute chaos. Taylor struck Reagan with the hammer, hard, fast, repeatedly, the sound of metal against bone, the crack of a skull giving way. Reagan's head split open under the force. Blood sprayed across the walls, the floor, the furniture. The autopsy would later confirm massive skull fractures. Her brain had been exposed. But Taylor didn't stop there. She grabbed a knife, and she stabbed Reagan. Not once, not 10 times, over 100 times. The face, the neck, the chest, the stomach, the back, anywhere she could reach. It was overkill in the truest, most horrifying sense of the word. This wasn't about killing Reagan quickly. This was rage. This was panic. This was a woman who had crossed a line and couldn't go back, so she just kept going. Reagan fought. Of course she fought. She was a mother. She had Kinley sleeping in the next room. She had Braxlin still moving inside her belly. She clawed at Taylor's hands. Deep defensive wounds covered her palms and fingers where she tried to grab the blade, tried to push it away. But Reagan was 21 years old, barefoot, 7 months pregnant, and being attacked by someone who had come prepared to do this. And then Taylor turned to the belly. She pulled out the scalpel, the one she'd bought specifically for this moment, and she cut. Not like a surgeon, not with precision or care. She sliced a crude, jagged line across Reagan's abdomen, tearing through skin, through fat, through muscle. She cut into the womb itself and reached inside. Baby Braxlin was still alive when Taylor pulled her out. Alive, but struggling, her tiny chest barely rising. No medical equipment, no oxygen, no warmth. Just a blood-soaked blanket and a woman who had just murdered her mother. In the back room, 3-year-old Kinley woke up to the screams, to the sounds of violence, to the kind of terror a child that age shouldn't even have words for. Forensic psychologists would later testify that Reagan was conscious for most of the attack. She felt the hammer. She felt the knife. She felt the scalpel cutting into her belly. She died fighting, trying to protect her babies until the very last breath left her body. By the time Taylor left that house, 2 lives were over. One lay silent on the floor. The other was wrapped in a blanket, gasping for air that wouldn't save her. By 9 a.m., Taylor Renee Parker was back behind the wheel of her gray Nissan Altima, speeding north on US Highway 82 toward the Oklahoma border. Her hands were stained with blood. Her jeans were soaked through. In her lap, wrapped in a blanket that was more red than white, was baby Braxlin, barely breathing, her tiny body in shock from the trauma of being ripped out of her mother's womb without medical care, without oxygen, without a chance. Taylor wasn't heading to a hospital. She was running, trying to put distance between herself and the crime scene, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make it look believable, how to convince Wade, convince the doctors, convince everyone that this baby was hers, but she was speeding. And just before 9:30 a.m., near Idabel, Oklahoma, she caught the attention of Texas State Trooper Chad Wynn. He flipped on his lights. She pulled over. And then Taylor put on the performance of her life. She jumped out of the car before Trooper Wynn even reached her door, holding the baby in her arms, screaming, "I just gave birth. I just gave birth on the side of the road. She's not breathing. Please help me, please." Trooper Wynne looked at her, looked at the baby, and something didn't add up. There was no afterbirth. No placenta on the side of the road. No umbilical cord still properly attached. It looked like it had been cut, but not clamped, not tied off the way paramedics do it. And Taylor? She didn't look like a woman who had just pushed a baby out of her body minutes earlier. She was frantic, yes. Covered in blood, yes. But too clean in the wrong places. Too composed. Too put together. Still, this was an emergency. A baby wasn't breathing. Trooper Wynne radioed for EMS, and within minutes, paramedics arrived. They loaded Taylor and the baby into an ambulance and rushed them to McCurtain Memorial Hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma. Taylor kept up the act the entire ride, crying, begging them to save her baby, playing the devastated mother who had just gone through a traumatic roadside birth. But the moment they got her into that hospital, the lie started to unravel. At McCurtain Memorial Hospital, nurses and doctors swarmed around baby Braxlyn, trying desperately to save her. But she was already slipping away. Severe oxygen deprivation, trauma, shock. Her little body had been through something no newborn should survive. Paramedics worked on her for minutes that felt like hours, but it was too late. Braxlyn Sage Hancock was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. And while that tragedy was unfolding, hospital staff were examining Taylor Parker, and what they found made them stop cold. She had no physical signs of childbirth, none, no vaginal tearing, no cervical dilation, no signs of contractions or labor. Her body looked like someone who had never been pregnant at all. And when doctors examined her more closely, they discovered something that changed everything. Taylor Parker had no uterus. She'd had a full hysterectomy. Pregnancy was medically impossible. The baby she'd been holding, it wasn't hers. It couldn't be. Nurses immediately alerted hospital security. Security called the police. And within minutes, Taylor Parker went from a patient to a suspect. Meanwhile, 30 miles south in New Boston, Texas, Reagan's mother, Jessica Brooks, was pulling into her daughter's driveway. Reagan had missed her doctor's appointment. She wasn't answering her phone. Jessica had a bad feeling. The front door was unlocked. She pushed it open and called out Reagan's name. Silence. She walked inside. And then she saw it. Her daughter, face down on the floor, blood everywhere, skull crushed, body torn apart, and her belly sliced open, empty, the baby gone. Jessica screamed. She called 911, her voice breaking, barely able to get the words out. "My daughter, she's pregnant, she's dead, her stomach is cut open, her baby is gone." Dispatchers tried to calm her down, but there was no calming this. In the back room, little Kinley was still in the house, alone, traumatized, too young to understand what had just happened, but old enough to know that something was terribly, horribly wrong. Within hours, detectives connected the dots. The hospital report in Oklahoma, the crime scene in Texas, the timeline, the blood, the baby. It all pointed to one person, Taylor Renee Parker. By 10:20 a.m., she was officially detained by Oklahoma police. She tried to keep lying, tried to insist the baby was hers, but the evidence was overwhelming. The lie had shattered. The truth was out. And now, the entire state of Texas wanted to know, how does someone do this? How does someone fake a pregnancy for 10 months, murder a young mother, cut a baby out of her body, and then drive away like it's just another Friday morning? The answer would come 2 years later, in a courtroom in Bowie County, where a jury would decide whether Taylor Renee Parker deserved to live or die. September 12, 2022. Bowie County Courthouse in New Boston, Texas is packed. Metal detectors at the doors, extra deputies in the halls. Outside, news vans line the street, satellite dishes pointed at the sky. Inside, every seat is filled. Reporters, locals, family members, everyone there for one reason: the capital murder trial of Taylor Renee Parker. The prosecutors are not subtle about what they want. They're not asking this jury to lock her away and forget about her. They are asking them to kill her. Death, not life. Needle, not bars. Their first witness says everything about how they plan to do it. They call Jessica Brooks, Reagan's mother. She steps up to the stand, already shaking, already crying. The jurors have seen emotion before, but not like this. The prosecutor barely gets through the first few questions before the screens in front of the jury light up with crime scene photos. Reagan on the floor, the blood, the open abdomen, the emptiness where a baby should have been. Jessica breaks. Her voice cracks as she tries to speak. She tells them about walking into the house, about seeing her daughter torn open on the floor, about knowing instantly that the baby was gone. She doesn't talk like a witness. She talks like a mother whose entire world has been ripped out of her chest and left to rot on a living room carpet. And the jury looks at those photos while listening to her scream that memory back to life. Then, the prosecution switches gears. No more tears. Now it's data. They put Taylor's own phone on trial. They walk the jury through her Google searches, line by line. How to perform a C-section at home. Buying fake ultrasound pictures. How to fake pregnancy symptoms. How long can a baby survive without oxygen? They show that these aren't random midnight questions. They're a pattern, a plan, a timeline crawling toward October 9th. Medical experts take the stand next. A forensic pathologist describes Reagan's injuries in clinical, horrifying detail. Hammer blows to the skull, over 100 stab wounds, and finally, the crude cut across her abdomen. He explains that based on blood flow and wound depth, Reagan was alive when Taylor sliced into her. She felt it. She was conscious. This was not a body being carved. This was a living woman being opened like an object. Another doctor talks about Braxlin, how she was alive when taken from the womb, how she didn't die instantly, how she slowly suffocated from lack of oxygen, struggling for life in the back of that Nissan, then on a hospital table before slipping away. The message is clear. This wasn't just one murder. It was two, and both were slow. The defense finally gets its turn, and they know they can't argue that Taylor didn't do it. The evidence is too strong. The lies are too obvious, so they aim for her mind. They bring in experts to say Taylor suffers from borderline personality disorder. They talk about trauma, instability, emotional chaos, a broken sense of self. They try to paint her as someone who wasn't fully anchored in reality, someone whose desperation twisted into delusion, not evil, sick. But the prosecution is ready for that. They remind the jury that people with mental illness exist everywhere, and they don't stalk pregnant women, fake pregnancies for nearly a year, call in bomb threats to clinics, research home C-sections, and then slice a baby out of a conscious mother's body. They hammer the planning, the patience, the detail. They bring up how Taylor spent months staging this pregnancy. Fake ultrasounds, fake appointments, fake contractions, how she visited clinics under false pretenses, how she lied to Wade's family for gifts, how she manipulated everyone around her. That's not a break from reality. They argue that's control. Then they play a recorded phone call Taylor made from jail to her mother. This is her moment to apologize, to sob, to beg forgiveness, to say Reagan's name, to show even a sliver of humanity. She doesn't. Instead, her voice is flat, almost annoyed. She doesn't talk about Reagan. She doesn't talk about Braxlin. She doesn't talk about Kinley, who woke up alone in a house soaked with her mother's blood. All she says is, "I messed up real bad." The jury watches her face as the call plays. No tears, no flinch, no visible regret. Just a blank, detached stare. By the time closing arguments are done, the courtroom feels heavy. Everyone knows where this is heading. October 3rd, 2022. The jury files back in after just over an hour of deliberation. That's less time than it takes to watch a movie. They don't look confused. They don't look torn. They look decided. Guilty. Capital murder. But the story doesn't end there. The punishment phase is its own war. On November 9th, 2022, the same jury returns to that courtroom to answer one final question. Should Taylor Parker live the rest of her life in a concrete box, or should the state of Texas kill her? They've heard days of victim impact statements, Reagan's family, friends, people who loved her. They've listened to experts describe in chilling detail exactly what happened to Reagan and Braxlin. They've seen every photo, every medical diagram, every screenshot of Taylor's lies. The bailiff announces the jury is back. The room goes silent. The foreman stands. The judge asks for the sentence. Death. No hesitation, no mercy. Death by lethal injection. Judge John Tidwell turns to Taylor. He reads the formal language, but underneath the legal script is a simple message. You did something so monstrous that the only punishment this state finds acceptable is to erase you. Taylor doesn't cry. She doesn't beg. She doesn't scream. She just stands there, expression flat, as if this is happening to someone else. In the gallery, it's a different story. Reagan's family breaks. Years of held breath collapse all at once. Some sob, some shake, some just sit there, staring at the woman who took everything from them. Then Jessica Brooks stands up to speak. This isn't the broken mother from the first day anymore. Her voice is raw, but steady. She looks at Taylor and unleashes the truth no one in that room will ever forget. She talks about how her baby girl was alive, how Reagan felt every blow, every cut, how she fought for her babies while Taylor smashed her skull, ripped her open, and stole her child. And then she says what so many are thinking, that Taylor doesn't deserve to walk this earth. The courtroom doesn't clap. This isn't a movie. It's worse. It's real. But you can feel the agreement, the anger, the grim satisfaction. Within hours, paperwork is signed. Guards escort Taylor out of the courtroom, out of Bowie County, and into a system built for people like her. Death row. A woman who once faked a baby bump for Facebook photos now wears a prison uniform and waits in a concrete box for the state of Texas to decide when, not if, her story ends. Taylor Renee Parker was immediately transferred to Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas. She's now one of only 7 women sitting on Texas death row. At 32 years old, she's the youngest female death row inmate in the state. She lives in solitary confinement, 23 hours a day, in a 6 by 10-foot concrete cell. But here's the thing about death row in Texas. Death doesn't come quickly. Inmates wait 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Some die of old age before the needle ever touches their arm. Some are exonerated. Some win appeals. But most just sit there, stuck in a limbo between living and dying, waiting for a date that may or may not ever arrive. As of December 2025, Taylor Parker still has no execution dates scheduled, but that doesn't mean she's stopped fighting. In September 2025, Parker's attorney filed an appeal with the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, arguing that her trial was tainted by prejudicial evidence. The claim that prosecutors fat-shamed her and trivialized her life in front of the jury. Defense attorney Jeff Halpern pointed to testimony about Parker's weight loss surgery, her extramarital affairs, and her appearance. Evidence he claimed had nothing to do with the crime itself, and everything to do with making the jury hate her as a person. He cited a recent Supreme Court ruling in another case where a death sentence was vacated for similar reasons. Prosecutors fired back. They argued that Parker's obsession with her boyfriend, her weight loss journey, her desperate need for his approval, her lies about being pregnant, was the entire motive for the murder. It wasn't about shaming her. It was about showing why she killed Reagan Hancock and stole her baby. The state's attorney even patted his own stomach in court and said, "I am fat," drawing laughter from the gallery. The message was clear. This isn't about appearance. This is about motive. In November 2025, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals made their decision. They rejected every single one of Parker's 25 points of error. Judge Lee Finley wrote the opinion, and it was blunt. Finding no reversible error, we affirm appellant's conviction and sentence of death. Taylor Parker's death sentence stands. The appeals will continue. They always do in capital cases. But the highest criminal court in Texas has spoken. She's guilty, and she's going to die for it. But while lawyers argue in courtrooms and Taylor sits in her cell, there's a little girl in Texas who is living with the consequences of what happened on October 9th, 2020. Reagan's daughter Kinley was 3 years old that morning. She woke up to screams. She was in the house when her mother was being murdered. She's now 7 years old, growing up without the mother who fought for her until her last breath, and without the baby sister she never got to meet. She carries scars that no court verdict can heal, no execution can undo. Taylor Parker didn't just take 2 lives, she shattered an entire family. She left a little girl with trauma that will follow her for the rest of her life. She turned a quiet Friday morning in a small Texas town into a national horror story. And whether it takes 5 years or 50, whether it happens under the lights of the Huntsville death chamber or in a prison hospital bed decades from now, the state of Texas will one day make her pay. Because in Texas, some lies cost you everything, including your life.